Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Revelation class that I've been doing here on our uh, on this little Substack live stream for the last few weeks. This is week 5, and we are still in the midst of the 7 letters to the 7 churches. So, if you have been with us, you know that we have been working our way through these letters that John has been writing. So we started with chapter 1 with an introduction of who John is, an elder probably sometime in the 90s CE, writing to these 7 churches in the Roman province of Asia, which is modern day Turkey, or what we call Asia Minor. And John seems to have been an elder in the region, and he's been writing to these churches. And so rather than going through the churches in the order that John has them, because it's likely that the order he has is an ancient like mail route that he used, we've been linking them together thematically. And what we've been asking during this series is what it looks like for a person of faith and for communities of faith to resist authoritarianism, because that's what these churches in ancient Rome faced. How do we live faithfully under an authoritarian government? And that's really, I think, ever more pertinent question today for us. So we've looked at Ephesus and Pergamum. Last week we looked at Thyatira and Sardis. Today we're going to look at Smyrna and Philadelphia. And the next week we're going to finish with Laodicea, and then also wrap up and kind of summarize the letters before we move on to the rest of the book. So let's start with the church in Smyrna. Smyrna was another port city. It was very wealthy due to trade, being on a port, right? It was the first city to build the temple to Roma, who is the sort of embodiment of the people of Rome. She is depicted as this goddess. We'll see lots more of Roma as we go through the series. Don't worry. And their coins, as you can see here in the slide, feature a wreath crown. And there's actually 2 different words in Greek that get translated crown in the book of Revelation in our English translations. One is the word Stephanon, and the other is the word diadem. Diadem is like a crown, like a ruler would wear. Again, you've heard probably the word diadem, and it's an Old English word, comes from the Greek there. But this is not that. Okay, we're going to see some diadems later, but this is a Stephanon, and it refers to a sort of a wreath or a laurel crown, which is what Olympic athletes would get as an award for their game. So you could think of this more as like a gold medal, right? Is anytime think of how you associate with gold medals. That's how the ancient readers would have associated with a Stephanon crown. And so that's what the kind of crown, as you can see, that's on the coins that were used in Smyrna. So, in the letter to the Smyrnans, Jesus identifies himself as the first and the last who was dead and came to life. What the church is doing well is he says, I know your poverty in your affliction, even though you're rich. So something is going on with this church. And what we can kind of tell as we work through the letter is that they're facing the same kinds of persecution the other churches have, but it seems as though rather than becoming this sort of like cold, sterile type of church like the Ephesians were, or rather than capitulating to these false teachers like those other churches were, they're resisting and they're suffering for it. They're probably losing income. They're probably we know they're being persecuted not just by the Greeks in the area, but also by their fellow Jews. Remember that Christianity was originally a Jewish movement. Jesus comes out of Judaism and claimed not to be setting aside Judaism, but to be fulfilling Judaism. And so all of the earliest Christian movements were primarily Jewish. They even continued to worship in synagogues with their fellow Jews. And we can see here that created tensions. John refers to the Jews in Smyrna as not true Jews, but the synagogue of Satan. Now, today, you can imagine why that creates all kinds of anti-Semitism, but it's important to remember the context of Revelation, which was this was not Gentiles versus Jews. And so Gentiles saying, hey, these Jewish people are actually minions of Satan, and therefore, like somehow all Jews are minions of Satan. That, again, that's the anti-Semitism, right? What John is doing here is trying to defend his fellow Jews who are being persecuted by their ethnic siblings. they're being pushed out of the synagogues essentially because the Christians were bringing so much persecution from the Romans, and it was causing the non-Christian Jews to receive some of that same persecution. So in order to keep themselves safe, they're trying to push out the Jesus following Jews and distinguish themselves. Say, hey, those guys are not like us. I mean, sort of probably what would happen today if, I don't know, like in your church on a Sunday morning, some people came in who were like snake handlers, right? And they said, hey, in Jesus' name, we're like waving these rattlesnakes around. And you would be like, whoa, hey, look, whatever kind of Jesus stuff y'all are doing is we're not down with that. Y'all got to leave and take that somewhere else. That was sort of the attitude of the non-Jesus Jews, right? That they except again, they were facing persecution from the Roman government. So John says, hey, the Jews who are doing this kind of thing, they're a synagogue of Satan, right? They're not true Jews like we are, right? So again, we have to be so careful when we interpret these texts today because it so easily becomes very anti-Semitic. You can see why that would happen, right? But in the original context, this was an inter-community fight. It was Jews conversing with other Jews and trying to work out who this Jesus guy was and what he meant for Judaism, right? And again, just after a couple hundred years, uh, Christianity really in the main part split off from Judaism. And so then we read these texts back and we create all of this anti-Semitic rhetoric, which is bad, completely bad, right? Now the warning here and the problem that this church faces, interestingly, is not an internal problem like we've seen in all the other churches. It's an external problem. Jesus warns them that they're about to suffer. And in fact, they're going to be thrown into prison for 10 days, and it's going to result in their death, many of them. Again, 10 days here in Revelation, probably not literal 10 days. The number 10 represents like a total time or like the fullness of time. So he's basically probably saying, like, some of you are going to be in prison until you die. And then he warns them that if they're faithful, the promise here is that they will not be harmed by the second death. So they will be harmed by the first death, right? They're going to die in prison, some of them. They're going to die because of their faithfulness to Jesus, but they will not be harmed by the second death. And then they will receive a crown of life, a gold medal. Now, that's why Jesus' introduction to this church is so important. He is the first and the last, right? He's the beginning and the end. He has the final word on what is truth, and who is living. And he is the one who is dead and came to life. So strong claims by Jesus here to be in charge of the fate of the church, which again is something we've seen in some of the other churches with them holding the stars, right? But then also that he is in control of life and death. He is the one who himself died and was raised from the dead. So if these Smyrna Christians also face death, remember, they're imitating Jesus. It's a really powerful promise to this church to maintain the course, stay the course and stay faithful. Now we're going to go to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is the other church that's suffering for their faith instead of capitulating. Right? Philadelphia was also destroyed by the same earthquake that hit Sardis in 17 CE. We talked about that last week. And Philadelphia was also rebuilt by Rome. Again, that was a common strategy by Rome to engender loyalty. So the citizens renamed the city Neo Caesarea, New Caesar, in appreciation, and then they later renamed it Philadelphia Flavia to show their support for the Emperor Vespasian, who is the part of the Flavian dynasty. Okay, so in the Church of Philadelphia, Jesus is he who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. This is a paraphrase of Isaiah 22:22. And it represents who has the authority over the house of David, which is the messianic kingdom. That is Jesus alone who is the one who controls who gets into the kingdom and who doesn't. Right? He's the heir of David. You can hear here again a very inter-Jewish conversation. Who are the true sons of David? Who are the ones that are truly following the king? What this church is doing well, Jesus says, look, you don't have much strength, but you have kept my word and you have not denied my name. Compare that to these other churches that have. The problem is that they have little strength. And this is not an indictment. Jesus isn't like, little weaklings need to go to the gym, right? He's saying, I see you in your weakness. I see that you don't have much power. I see that you're hurting. The warning is, I'm coming soon, so hold on to what you have so no one will take your crown. A very similar kind of promise to what we had in Sardis, right? But here, Jesus is saying something even more profound, that they already have their gold medal. They already have it. They already won. What they have to do is make sure that they hold on to it, stay faithful, so no one snatches it from them at the last minute. The promise is that the one who is victorious, Jesus will make into a pillar in the temple of my God, and never again will they leave it. And they'll write the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven, and I will also write in them my new name. So again, a very powerful statement here that they will be part of this rebuilt new city, which again has all of these echoes of Philadelphia's history, right? And this new temple that's being built and new names that are happening to the Philadelphian Christians. I guess I should have gone to Philadelphia, huh? Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. I didn't change my slide there. It's okay. You don't really get to see much here because there's not a lot of cool ruins in Philadelphia, but you do get this 7th century basilica. So, so when we go to talking about resisting authoritarianism, what are we talking about here? Well, I think it's fascinating that both of these churches are facing uh, the same kind of struggles against an authoritarian government, but they are not giving into the temptation of religious nationalism. They're not blending Christianity with Romanism, right? Or doing what today we would call it Christian nationalism, right? They're not doing that. Instead, they're remaining faithful and they're suffering for it. And Jesus's message to them is hang on. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but I have the final word. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about for us, especially those of us who are working hard to resist Christian nationalism, how pointless it feels and how frustrating it feels right now when we see so much happening and so many things getting worse. And again, it just seems like a lot of these struggles are insurmountable. And so I wanted to share this amazing quote that I found from Rebecca Solnit. It's from her book, Hope in the Dark. And I actually got this quote via Andre Henry, who's one of my favorite activists and thinkers. But Solnit talks about how different hope is from optimism. Okay, because I think they really are very different. So I want to read this. Solnit says, hope is an embrace of the unknown and the unknowable, an alternative to the certainty of both optimism and pessimism. Optimists think it will all be fine without our involvement. Pessimists adopt the opposite position. Both excuse themselves from acting. What Jesus is advocating here is not optimism, right? He's not suggesting these churches just close their eyes, whistle a tune, and hope that things are, and believe things will get better without their involvement. He is calling them to a very active kind of a faith that takes seriously the pains and the struggles that are going on in their world. And in that way, it's hope, it's active, it's engaged. It's not just a thing that we sort of throw a prayer up and bury our heads in the sand. So in that vein, I want to ask a couple of questions to leave us with. Maybe we can take these into some conversation. First, who are my allies, right? Who are those other people that are around me in this struggle that I can link arms with and find some encouragement next to? Who are they? Seriously, like list them out. Maybe make it a point to cultivate a deeper relationship with them. Maybe even be very explicit. Go to some of these people and say, "Hey, I know we're maybe not as close as we could be, and maybe this is going to sound weird, but I find you to be someone who could be a really powerful ally in this time because you're someone who also speaks out against these things. And I think maybe we could encourage each other and be allies in these next years together as we're facing all of this together." What's the worst that could happen there, right? And then the next question is, what does it take for us to endure? What do I need in order to make it? Knowing that some of us may be thrown in prison for 10 days, right? Knowing that we're going to face all kinds of trials and tribulations from both people that we thought were on our team, other Christians who have given into Christian nationalism, and so are what John might call a church of Satan, and also, of course, from the authoritarian government that is hostile to the way of Jesus that we see passing policy and enacting and even waging war right now. Right? What do I need? And then, more importantly, maybe what do we need? How do we remain faithful together? I think these are provocative questions, and I love to ask them with you. Thanks so much for watching. Again, these are all free. If you'd like to subscribe, and even if you'd like to subscribe at a paid tier, of course, I'd always appreciate that, but it's not necessary. I would love to hear some of what you think about a lot of this and where you see this going in the next few weeks. Next week, we're talking about the church in Laodicea, and we will be then sort of wrapping up and kind of reviewing all of the churches, and then we'll be ready to dive into the rest of the book. So I can't wait until next week. Thanks as always for tuning in and subscribing, and until next time, grace and peace be with you.